Well, Canada just observed National Indigenous Peoples Day on Wednesday. It's a chance to highlight and really dig into the issues facing the Indigenous people of our country. For instance, does the suggestion to change part of Canada's national anthem provide the opportunity to address more serious problems facing Indigenous communities? It might seem that this one idea to change a word in our anthem is the opportunity to set a table for discussion and to help shed some light on what should take priority. Southern Alberta resident Cheyenne McGinnis is with me to share her perspective on where the conversation needs to start. She's a social media influencer, an entrepreneur, and owner of Indigenous Busyness. Cheyenne, welcome to Bridge City News. Great to have you on.
Yeah, thank you for having me
Of
today. It's
course.
really great to be on this segment and just to be able to share some of my thoughts today.
Amazing. Okay, first off, we observe National Indigenous Peoples Day this week, and in fact, it's actually Indigenous Peoples Month. So tell me what it means to you that the country has designated this time to think about and focus on the issues, or is it just an empty gesture in your eyes? What do you think?
I think it's a nice gesture, I guess you could say, but it can feel a little empty to some of us, especially us activists who are working towards bigger goals with the Canadian government and just really looking at social goals of Indigenous peoples is really important during this month and highlighting some of those in the way of awareness, just kind of. Looking at what we can do in the future as well as the present to change the past. And I think that that's really important to look to the past a lot during this month and see what can be done differently.
So interesting. Okay, so I opened up by mentioning the anthem. So recently, the Mississauga, Ontario mayor, she tabled a motion to ask the federal government to officially change the lyrics of the Canadian national anthem. So the proposal came forward to change the words from our home and native land to our home on native land. So what's your opinion of this?
Well, I think that that's also a good gesture, but it's a little bit empty in terms of that there is other issues, especially with my business. We really look at business and reconciliation. And in the past little while, there have been deals signed that haven't really gone towards that place of reconciliation. They're still trying to push pipelines through. They're still trying to do mining and resource extraction on native lands, as well as burying nuclear waste in Treaty 3 territory. That was something that came up over the past year. And there was coal mining even brought forward in Treaty 7 territory, where I am, where I live and have been born into the Treaty 7 territory and their people. So I think it's really interesting that we have these kind of gestures, but there's no real action sometimes from the Canadian government. It just kind of feels like we say things and they're not taken to heart because, again, I was at that mining and minerals discussion in 2018 and felt like my voice wasn't heard and all of that, specifically speaking to the extraction of our resources from native lands and just that the profit doesn't always necessarily stay in Canada or go to Canadians. So I think that that's really something I like to focus on more is the bigger picture of where we're standing in terms of society and economy and the global economy as well.
Okay, so when we hear about change, then to better honor Indigenous people in Canada, where would you suggest that the change begin?
I think it starts with that awareness of the issues we face, as well as just the uneven playing field that has been given to us as Indigenous peoples in this society. And, you know, we want to start looking at wealth generation and just kind of like generational wealth as well is really important to me as an Indigenous woman, is to create that base for my future and my future legacy and what it means to really be an ancestor today, so that your future children and future grandchildren will have a better future than you even had today. So I think that that's that looking towards and back 7 generations is really important, not only for Indigenous people, but also for others as well.
So interesting. Can you maybe tell us about some of the different rules? Because you'd mentioned this before when I interviewed you, that some of the different rules that Indigenous people have to follow, but other Canadians are not subject to.
Yeah, I think it really goes back to that Indian Act and like how Canada came to be as a country through the Royal Proclamation of 1876. It was really linked to manifest destiny, and just I think that that's still a big thing today. Is that we're still very much controlled by the British Empire, and just kind of like those crown corporations that are in place, crown lands, First Nations lands, just kind of like it's all very connected, and it's came to be that Canada is almost like a corporation, I would say. And so we're not really like, I wouldn't say we're necessarily a society even anymore. It's more of a corporation. And that's how the government's kind of run things in the past little while, I feel like, in just terms of creating these deals that don't always necessarily benefit Canadians.
Interesting. In your opinion, are there any bills that maybe need to be reopened?
I think that big omnibus bill should just be repealed, and some of the other ones that were put through to just. I couldn't speak on too many right now that I have issues with, just because it's been a while since I've looked at
Sure.
any
Yeah.
politics. I've become a little agnostic, to be honest, with the whole Trudeau's government, and just kind of not really wanting to play in that world anymore with my business even, and just kind of focus on what I can do in my day-to-day life to focus on the bigger picture and try to generate wealth for my family, generate wealth for my community, be a spokesperson for these issues, and also just look at what I can do with my education to help others as well.
And you are very, very educated. And you mentioned your business there. So Indigenous busyness. So what is that a platform for?
It's a platform for artists mainly, to connect as well as to find out about opportunities. And we offer a bursary each fall as well, from some of our profits. And last year we were able to support over 1,500 back to the artist community and LGBTQ community. So I think that that's really important, is for me to be able to give back through my business, especially to the artist community, which is one of the communities that doesn't always get the benefit of the doubt, or doesn't always get that fair wage in their work. So I think that that's really important, that we've built our business around wellness through arts, entrepreneurism, and financial literacy is essentially what we've done with Indig Busyness. And we try to create products that will hold and retain our Blackfoot culture and our Blackfoot way of life for future generations to come.
Right. And does it also, do you use your art as a form of reconciliation as well?
Yeah, I say I would. Yeah, definitely. A lot of my work speaks to relations between nations, and that's something that I've done a lot of in my career, as nation building, and just kind of focusing on what we can see each other as. Collaborators versus competitors in these kind of issues that we're facing today as Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples. Because, poverty doesn't only affect Indigenous peoples. We all want a healthy environment as well. And I think that that's really important to look at those bigger pictures as to how we can work together as Canadians, and just as like North Americans even, because it goes down into the USA too as well. And further to that, we're a very global economy these days. So I think that that's finding those relations between nations is really important.
Hmm. You were mentioning you're kind of exasperated with the federal politics these days, but what about
Yes.
Indigenous politics? Can you tell us about how the chief and council
I
system
think
could be reformed?
it's based in the same system, so it's not really like I don't find leadership to always be on top of what the people want. And I think that there needs to be a total reform of the chief and council system as well, and just kind of looking at the future of what it's going to mean to be Indigenous, even. And, we have to start looking at ways we can speak nation to nation rather than these kind of chief and council systems that have been created by government, right?
Hmm. Yeah. You were mentioning a lot about the environment there and kind of standing against the pipeline. So, clean drinking water has been an ongoing issue for many reserves. So, why do you think that this is something that the government or maybe the band councils can't get right?
Yeah, I think that's a really loaded question. I don't know what the right answer is in all of that, but I do think it's a very unfair issue that we face today. And it's been going on for like 50 plus years in some communities, these boil water advisories, as well as just not having access to clean water. I know during my time on the coast, I saw a lot of just it was culture shock almost in terms of just being to some of these smaller communities, because I do come from the Blood Tribe, which is one of the larger communities in Canada. And just seeing the disparity in some of these communities was really unfair to me. And so I really like to help others and just see their communities healthy. And I try to do that through ecosystem protection, through knowledge protection, through just sharing knowledge and education, as well as working towards a brighter future for all, not just some.
Hmm. Okay, so let's get to the issue of land. When you and I spoke during our pre-interview, we talked a little bit about how migration happens during and after war. So you touched on the guest nations, lost tribes, as some might call them, so which are currently on Blackfoot territory. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I think it's just we've accepted them now as part of the Treaty 7 nations, right? And that's something that we worked towards over many, many years. And I think that that's just important to keep nurturing because, they have settled in this place now, and we are a compassionate people as the Blackfoot people. And I think that that's just important to hold on to and just kind of work towards. Making them feel settled, making them feel um, welcome as well, and just building those nation to nation relations, like I keep talking about, is really important for the future of all of us, right? Because we have intermingled, we do have, relatives in these nations now. And I think that that's just important to really focus on the history as well as the future and what present day is teaching us today for the future.
Hmm. I'm sure as a Blackfoot woman that you are quite an activist when it comes to missing and endangered, missing and murdered Indigenous women. This is something probably very near and dear to your heart. Can you talk a little bit about the Highway of Tears, for example?
Yeah, I think it's a very sad issue because a lot of these young women are very young, and they're even younger than I am. Like, I'm 30 years old. And I think that that's really like sad to see some of our youngest go missing like that. And it's so tragic to the families. It's never going to be a wound that can be healed but quickly by either money, by government intervention. Those ones that we have lost, we've lost forever. And I think it's really important to highlight that issue of, resource extraction and things like that. those big projects sometimes bring that issue into our communities, where there's man camps set up, where there's other issues such as just drug trafficking, human trafficking. And I think that that's really not great in our society that happens today. Still, there needs to be more government intervention in terms of mental health resources and just kind of like focusing on, a clean, safe drug supply as well is really important. I'm really a big advocate for harm reduction over, shaming others into their drug addiction or their addictions. I think that there needs to be more intervention as well as resources for these people to get help and to seek the help that they need to.
Oh, yeah. Cheyenne, it looks like we're out of time, but thank you so much for spending time talking about some of the issues facing Indigenous people during this Indigenous Peoples Month, and as we just observed, Indigenous Peoples Day as well. So I thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Cheyenne McGinnis is a social media influencer, an entrepreneur, and owner of Indig Busyness.